Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to completely demystify the biology of panic. We're going to hand you a powerful, science-backed toolkit to finally conquer your fear of public speaking. Look, if just the thought of stepping up to a microphone makes your palms sweat and your heart race, you are absolutely in the right place today. We aren't just going to throw generic advice at you. No way. We're actually diving into the literal anatomy of what happens in your brain and body when you step on that stage, and more importantly, how you can hack that exact biological response. Believe it or not, even the world's absolute best speakers started out completely terrified. Take Adam Grant, the Wharton professor and best-selling author. After his very first public speech, which, by the way, he spent weeks having literal nightmares about, he got some pretty brutal audience feedback. Get this, one person actually wrote, "Try not to be so nervous. You looked like a Muppet and it seemed like you memorized every single sentence." I mean, ouch, right? Grant was so visibly tense, he was actually causing the audience to physically shake in their seats. But fast forward to today, and he gives hundreds of highly praised keynote speeches. So what does this tell us? Well, the dread of stepping onto a stage, or even just speaking up in a high-stakes meeting, is a nearly universal human experience. We all feel it. But here is the incredible news. This panic response, it's not a permanent personality flaw. It is just a biological mechanism. And because it's biological, it can absolutely be hacked. By understanding the exact anatomy of this fear, you can transform it from a crippling barrier into the exact fuel you need for a really dynamic, effective performance. Okay, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll be deconstructing the dread. Then we'll look at the vicious cycle of panic, followed by reframing fear. After that, we'll pack your physical toolkit, and finally, we'll cover stepping onto the stage. Let's kick things off with Section 1, deconstructing the dread. We really need to understand the biology of nervousness here. First up, we've got to draw a clear line between standard nervousness and clinical anxiety. Nervousness is a totally normal, short-lived biological reaction. It's basically your prehistoric fight or flight response kicking in because of a specific event, like a big speech or a job interview. Your body's just pumping adrenaline to help you survive what it thinks is a threat. Anxiety, on the flip side, is a more chronic, persistent condition. It's characterized by excessive worry that often doesn't even have a specific trigger. What we are primarily tackling today is that acute, intense wave of nervousness that hits you right before presentation. Moving right along to Section 2, the vicious cycle. This is all about the cognitive traps we fall into. Have you ever heard of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short? Well, this model illustrates something super important. Our internal experience is definitely not a one-way street. Your thoughts, your physical symptoms, and your behaviors are constantly feeding into and reinforcing each other. Think about it. You have a negative thought, and boom, your body responds with physical tension. That physical tension then messes with your behavior. Maybe you start avoiding eye contact, or you rush through your words. And guess what? That behavior just creates more negative thoughts. It's this massive interconnected loop. So here's the really crucial point, how this triangle actually accelerates into a full-blown panic attack. Let's walk through this vicious cycle together. Imagine you step up to the podium. Instantly, your fight or flight kicks in, so your heart rate naturally jumps. You notice your chest pounding, and suddenly you have a catastrophic thought. Oh no, I'm in real trouble now. Everyone can see I'm shaking. That terrifying thought acts like an alarm bell to your brain, signaling that the danger is escalating, which dumps even more adrenaline into your system. Now your physical symptoms get worse. You start feeling dizzy or breathless, which leads to an even scarier thought like, I'm gonna faint. Literally, your mind and body accidentally trap you in this escalating runaway loop of panic. Okay, so how do we get out of it? That brings us to Section 3, reframing fear. Let's talk mental hacks. To break this cycle, we actually have to completely ignore the single most common piece of advice you have ever gotten about public speaking. You know the one. We've all heard it. We've all said it to ourselves. Just calm down, take a deep breath, and relax, right? Well, research from Harvard professor Alison Woodbrooks shows that trying to force yourself to calm down actually backfires. Why? Because anxiety is a really intense, high-arousal emotion. Telling your brain to suddenly downshift from full-blown panic into a perfectly relaxed state is kind of like trying to slam the brakes on a car going 100 miles an hour. It's almost impossible. In fact, when independent raters evaluated speeches from people who tried to, quote-unquote, relax, they found those speeches actually lacked persuasiveness and confidence. So, what do we do instead? Simple. We pivot. Physiologically speaking, humans have a stop system that slows us down and makes us cautious, and a go system that revs us up and creates excitement. Instead of fighting all that adrenaline to forcibly activate your stop system, you should reframe your fear to turn on your go system. How? You do this by simply telling yourself out loud, I am excited. It sounds crazy, but both anxiety and excitement are high arousal states. This makes it so much easier for your brain to convert that panic directly into enthusiasm. You're literally hijacking your own nervous energy and using it to your advantage. A total game changer. Now that we've got the mental side down, let's jump to section 4, the physical toolkit. Let's learn how to short-circuit that physical panic. When you feel physically overwhelmed, one of the absolute fastest ways to reset your nervous system is a technique studied by the Huberman Lab at Stanford. It's called the physiological sigh. It is incredibly simple but deeply effective. Here's how it works. First, you take a deep inhale through your nose. But right before you exhale, you take a quick, sharp second inhale. That little extra puff fully expands the tiny sacs in your lungs. Then you just release it all with a slow, complete exhale through your mouth. Doing this just 1 or 2 times aggressively removes carbon dioxide from your bloodstream. It rapidly rebalances your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, essentially forcing your body to physically calm down. Now, if your physical panic feels so extreme that you're kind of dissociating or completely losing focus, you need to intensely ground your brain in the present moment. And you do this by literally shocking your senses. For example, right before your speech, try holding a freezing cold ice cube in your bare hand, or pop a powerfully sour candy into your mouth. That intense physical sensation forces your brain to immediately drop those catastrophic thoughts and focus strictly on the immediate sensory input. And hey, if you are already out on stage, you can ground your mind by quickly doing some simple math in your head, like try counting backwards from 100 by 2s. It interrupts the emotional panic by forcing the logical part of your brain to turn on. Here's another incredibly powerful physical tool, progressive muscle relaxation. This directly targets the muscle tension symptom that feeds into that nasty CBT panic cycle we talked about earlier. Here is what you do. You systematically tense a specific muscle group, say, tightly clenching your fists or raising your shoulders all the way up to your ears. You hold that really high tension for 5 seconds, and then you abruptly release it, just letting the muscle go completely limp. You pause for 10 seconds to really feel the contrast, and then move down to the next part of your body. This deliberately exhausts your muscles' ability to hold stress, literally melting the physical tension away. All right, we've reached the final piece of the puzzle. Section 5, stepping onto the stage. Let's talk about real performance strategies. Practicing alone just isn't enough. Why? Because talking to an empty room doesn't trigger your body's arousal system. You absolutely must rehearse in front of a small group of people. Having even just a few people stare at you simulates that high-pressure environment far better than your bathroom mirror ever will. Second, humanize your audience before you even step out there. Read their bios, learn about them, find some common ground so they feel like peers, not judges. Third, when you do walk out, never ever start by just talking about yourself. Instead, open with a compelling story, a cool puzzle, or a thought-provoking question. This instantly shifts the spotlight and the pressure off of you and places the audience's attention entirely onto the ideas. Oh, and finally, if it's at all possible, dim the room lights. Less visibility of the audience's faces naturally lowers your biological arousal and helps you feel way less inhibited. So there we have it. We've completely dismantled the dread. As you've seen, that massive adrenaline rush you get from public speaking isn't some sign of impending doom. It's really just an ancient natural survival mechanism whose only goal is to help you succeed. You now have a complete physiological and mental toolkit to break the cycle of panic. So the only question left for you is, which of these science-backed tools are you going to choose to harness that incredible energy the very next time you step into the spotlight?